I never thought I'd be standing at the altar at 62 years old, watching my own daughter-in-law march down the aisle, not as a guest, but as someone determined to stop my wedding. Her face was a mask of righteous fury as she waved a folder of documents, screaming that I was mentally unfit and being manipulated. The church fell silent. 200 guests froze in their seats. My soon-to-be husband, Richard, squeezed my hand as Father Matthews calmly took the papers from Melissa's trembling hands. What happened next changed everything. The priest adjusted his glasses, skimmed the documents, then looked up with an expression I'll never forget. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, addressing my daughter-in-law, "not me. These are not competency evaluations. These appear to be bank statements from an account in your name, with transfers totaling exactly $217,842 from Eleanor's accounts over the past 14 months. That moment, the way the color drained from Melissa's face, how my son David's expression shifted from confusion to horror, will be etched in my memory until the day I die. I'd spent months collecting evidence, tracking every penny she'd stolen from me, while pretending to help manage my finances after my first husband passed. I knew exactly what those documents contained, because I'd asked my lawyer to give them to Father Matthews before the ceremony. What I hadn't expected was for Melissa to create the perfect moment for their revelation by trying to stop my wedding. Sometimes justice arrives in ways you never anticipate. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this happened overnight. I was married to Frank for 38 wonderful years. We raised our son David together, built a comfortable life in Rochester, and had just started enjoying retirement when Frank's heart gave out suddenly one Tuesday afternoon. I still remember the smell of the lasagna I was cooking when I found him slumped in his favorite recliner, the TV remote still clutched in his hand. One moment we were planning a cruise to Alaska, and the next I was planning a funeral. That was 3 years ago, and the silence in our house afterward was deafening. David was wonderful during those first few months. He came over regularly, helped with paperwork, and listened patiently when I would break down crying over finding Frank's reading glasses between sofa cushions or his favorite coffee mug in the dishwasher. But David lived 40 minutes away with his wife Melissa and their 2 children, and he couldn't be there every day. That's when Melissa started showing up more often, usually without David. "I'm just checking on you, Eleanor," she'd say with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "David's so busy with work, but I have flexibility with my real estate schedule." At first, I was grateful. Truly, when someone offers a hand while you're drowning in grief, you don't question their motives. You just take the hand. Melissa was 38, 24 years younger than David. They'd met when he was finalizing his divorce from his first wife, and Melissa had been his real estate agent. She had a certain polished charm, always perfectly dressed, not a hair out of place, with a way of making suggestions that somehow became decisions. "Eleanor, you really shouldn't be driving to the bank in this weather. Why don't I just take care of depositing Frank's insurance check for you? Or it's so complicated, these estate matters. My cousin is a financial advisor. Let me have him look over your accounts." Little things that seemed helpful, until they weren't. I'll tell you exactly how she gained access to my accounts later, because that detail is important. The first real red flag came about 6 months after Frank's passing. I'd been slowly emerging from the fog of grief, starting to handle my own affairs again. I went to the bank to check on a CD that was maturing. Frank and I had always been careful savers, planning for our future. The teller gave me an odd look when I asked about the account. "Mrs. Gardner, that certificate was closed last month. The funds were transferred to a different account." I felt a chill run down my spine. "That's not possible," I said. "I never authorized that." The teller pulled up the records, then turned the screen so I could see. There was my signature, or what looked like my signature, on a transfer authorization form. Except I had never signed it. When I confronted Melissa that evening, she had an explanation ready. "Oh, Eleanor, don't you remember? We talked about consolidating your smaller accounts to get a better interest rate. You signed the papers right here at the kitchen table." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her calendar. It was Tuesday, March 15th. David was working late. You were wearing your blue cardigan. Such specific details. For a moment, I questioned my own memory. Grief can do strange things to your mind. After all, was it possible I'd forgotten? "The money is safe," she assured me. "It's just in an account that gives you better returns." I'm only trying to help you protect what you and Frank worked so hard for. I nodded, apologized for my confusion, and went to bed with a gnawing feeling in my stomach. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about Melissa's explanation felt wrong. I got up around 2 a.m. and went to my home office, where I kept copies of important documents. I started going through bank statements, trying to piece together what had happened to the CD funds. The amount was significant, $43,000 that Frank and I had saved over decades. As I sorted through papers, my hand knocked over a cup of pens, sending them scattering across the floor. When I bent to pick them up, I noticed something behind the filing cabinet, a small blue notebook I didn't recognize. I pulled it out, curious. Inside, in what was clearly Melissa's handwriting, were what looked like practice copies of my signature, dozens of them, each getting closer to the real thing. My blood ran cold. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being robbed by my own daughter-in-law. I'll pause here to tell you something important. Trust your instincts. That feeling in your gut when something isn't right. Listen to it. I almost dismissed mine because I didn't want to believe someone in my family could betray me like this. I didn't want to create problems between David and his wife, or risk losing access to my grandchildren. So instead of confronting Melissa again, or telling David what I'd found, I made a different decision. I decided to watch and wait, to gather evidence, to be absolutely certain before I said a word. Looking back, I'm not sure if that was wisdom or cowardice, maybe a bit of both. The next morning, I called the bank and requested copies of all transactions from the past year. I told them I was organizing my tax documents, a small lie that made me uncomfortable, but necessary. When the statements arrived, I went through them line by line at my kitchen table. What I found made me physically ill. There were numerous withdrawals and transfers I'd never authorized. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $500 there, gradually increasing in frequency and size. All told, nearly $78,000 had disappeared from my accounts in just the first 6 months after Frank's death. The money from the CD was just the latest and largest theft. I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. How could I have been so blind? That evening, David called to check in, as he often did. "How are you doing, Mom?" he asked, his voice warm with genuine concern. I almost told him everything right then. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but something held me back. "I'm doing better," I lied. "Actually, I met some new friends at the community center. We're taking a pottery class together." The fabrication came easily, surprising me. "That's great, Mom," David said, sounding relieved. "Melissa was just saying she's worried you're isolating yourself too much." Of course she was. My isolation made her job easier. "How are things with you and Melissa?" I asked carefully. "Busy as usual," he sighed. "She's showing houses all weekend, and I've got the kids. Maybe we can bring them over for dinner next week." I agreed enthusiastically. I needed to see my son face to face, to gauge how much he knew or suspected. When David and the children visited the following week, watched him carefully. He seemed tired but normal, no signs of guilt or complicity. 10-year-old Emma and 7-year-old Jacob filled the house with noise and life, a welcome distraction from my dark thoughts. "Where's Melissa?" I asked casually, as I served homemade mac and cheese, the kids' favorite. "Another open house," David said, checking his watch. "She's been working non-stop lately. We're thinking about upgrading to a bigger house, maybe in Fairport. The school district is better there." I nodded, processing this information. A bigger house, was that where my money was going? "That sounds expensive," I remarked. David shrugged. "Melissa says we can make it work financially. She's been doing really well with commissions this year." Had she, or was my retirement funding their move? After dinner, while the kids watched a movie, I showed David some photos I'd discovered of him and Frank from a fishing trip years ago. As we looked through them, I casually mentioned, "You know, your dad was so organized with our finances. I've been trying to keep track of everything, but it's overwhelming sometimes." I watched his reaction closely. "Isn't Melissa helping you with all that?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "She mentioned setting up some accounts for you, streamlining things." So he knew something, but not everything. "She has been," I confirmed. "I'm just trying to understand it all better myself." I hesitated, then added, "Frank always said we should both know where every penny is." David nodded absently, his attention drawn to a photo of him and his father holding up a massive trout. That was a good day, he said softly. The moment to press further had passed. After they left, I sat in my quiet house feeling more alone than ever. I now had confirmation that David wasn't knowingly part of Melissa's scheme, but he was certainly benefiting from it. And I still had no idea how far this would go. Would she take everything if she could? I needed help. But who could I trust? Not family. David was too close to the situation, and my sister lived in Arizona with health problems of her own. Not friends from church. News traveled too fast in those circles, and I couldn't bear the humiliation. I needed a professional who was obligated to keep my confidence. The next morning, I called my bank and made an appointment with their fraud department. Mr. Torres at Rochester Community Bank was in his mid-50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I brought copies of the statements I'd gathered, along with the notebook containing Melissa's forgery practice. I was shaking as I laid everything out on his desk. "Take your time, Mrs. Gardner," he said gently. I told him everything. Frank's death, Melissa's increasing presence in my financial affairs, the unauthorized transfers, the forged signatures. As I spoke, Mr. Torres took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he looked up at me with an expression of controlled anger. "What you're describing is elder financial abuse, Mrs. Gardner. It's not just unethical. It's illegal." Hearing him say those words made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just family drama. It was a crime. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to destroy my son's marriage or hurt my grandchildren, but that money, it's everything Frank and I saved over 40 years. It's my security." Mr. Torres leaned forward. "First, we need to secure what's left. Today, we'll close your current accounts and open new ones with enhanced security protocols. No joint access, no phone transfers without in-person verification." He slid a form across the desk. "We'll also file a formal fraud report that will trigger an investigation. I have to warn you, Mrs. Gardner, this could eventually involve police." My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. Was I ready for that? To potentially see my daughter arrested, to put my son and grandchildren through that trauma? "Can we hold off on the police report?" I asked. "I want to secure my money first, then decide how to proceed." Mr. Torres nodded. "We can start with the security measures. The rest can wait, but not too long. Statute of limitations," he explained. As I left the bank with my new account information, I felt both lighter and heavier. I had taken the first step toward protecting myself, but the road ahead looked treacherous and lonely. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and cried, for the first time, not just about Frank, but about this new loss. The loss of trust, the loss of family harmony, the sense of safety I'd once felt with my son's family. How would I ever face David? What would this do to Emma and Jacob? I'd promised myself after Frank died that I wouldn't be a burden to my family, and now I felt like I was about to become the biggest burden imaginable, the mother who accused their mother of theft. The bank moved quickly. By the end of the week, my remaining funds, about $340,000 from Frank's life insurance, our savings and investments, were secured in new accounts. I had to decide my next move: confront Melissa directly, tell David what I'd discovered, pursue legal action. Each option seemed fraught with devastating consequences. I needed more guidance. On Mr. Torres's recommendation, I contacted Patricia Winters, an attorney specializing in elder law. Her office was in a converted Victorian house near downtown, warm and inviting rather than cold and corporate. Patricia herself was about my age, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and a reputation for being a fierce advocate for her clients. "The most important question," Patricia said after hearing my story, "is what outcome you want from this situation." She passed me a box of tissues as I dabbed at my eyes. "Some clients want full prosecution. Others want the money returned without criminal charges. Some just want the behavior to stop and family relationships preserved if possible." I blew my nose, considering. "I want my money back," I said finally. "I worked too hard for it, but I also want to give Melissa a chance to do the right thing before involving the authorities. For David's sake. For my grandchildren." Patricia nodded. "That's a reasonable approach. Let me outline a strategy." She began writing on a yellow legal pad. "First, we document everything. All transfers, all unauthorized access, all communications about your finances. Second, we draft a formal demand letter, giving her the opportunity to return the funds within a specified time frame. Third, we prepare for her response, which could range from full compliance to complete denial. I left Patricia's office with a homework assignment: gather every financial record, every email, every text message between Melissa and me that mentioned money, create a timeline of when she had been in my home, when documents might have been accessed or moved. It was detective work, and it gave me purpose. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt something other than despair. I felt determined. I'll tell you exactly how much money Melissa stole in total when we get to the formal accounting, because that number becomes very important later. But I can tell you now, it was enough to change my retirement completely. Enough to make me doubt I could stay in my home long term. While I was securing my finances and building my case, life continued. It's uncomfortable normal. Melissa called regularly, though I let most calls go to voicemail. When we did speak, I pretended nothing had changed. "How are you managing with the bills, Eleanor?" she asked during one call, her voice dripping with concern. "I noticed you haven't used the joint account I set up for household expenses recently." The joint account, another way she had accessed my money. "Oh, I've been using cash more," I lied. "It helps me budget better." There was a pause. "That's not very secure, Eleanor. We talked about this. Why don't I stop by tomorrow, and we can go through your expenses together?" The thought of her, in my home, with her practiced, concerned expression, made my stomach turn. "Actually, I'm busy tomorrow," I said, "meeting friends from my pottery class." Another lie, building on the first. "How about next week?" I needed to buy time. After hanging up, I called Patricia. "She's getting suspicious," I explained. "She wants to go through my expenses with me." Patricia was silent for a moment. "Eleanor, I think we need to move faster than we planned. If she realizes you've secured your accounts, she might destroy evidence or create a counter-narrative. She could claim you gifted her the money, or that you're having memory problems." That last suggestion sent a chill through me. Would Melissa go that far? Claim I was mentally incompetent to cover her tracks? "What do we do?" I asked. "We meet with David," Patricia said firmly, "before she can spin this her way. He needs to hear the truth from you first, with evidence in hand." The thought of confronting David made me physically ill. I postponed the meeting twice, making excuses about not feeling well, which wasn't entirely a lie. But Patricia was right. If Melissa suspected I was onto her, she would act quickly to protect herself. She was nothing if not calculating. So, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, 14 months after Frank's death, I invited David to lunch at a quiet restaurant Patricia had suggested, neutral territory. Public enough to prevent a scene but private enough for a difficult conversation. I arrived early and secured a corner booth. Patricia would be at a nearby table, not participating but present if needed. My hands shook as I arranged the folder of documents on the table: bank statements with highlighted transfers, copies of forged authorizations, the timeline of events. When David walked in, smiling as he spotted me, my resolve nearly crumbled. "Mom, you look great," he said, kissing my cheek before sliding into the booth across from me. "That pottery class must be good for you." I forced a smile, noticing the new watch on his wrist, a luxury brand Frank would never have considered affordable. "Was that bought with my money too?" "David," I began, my mouth dry despite the water I'd been sipping, "there's something serious I need to discuss with you." His smile faltered. "Are you okay? Is it your health?" The concern in his eyes made this even harder. "I'm physically fine," I assured him, "but something's been happening that you need to know about." I took a deep breath and pushed the folder toward him. "It involves Melissa and my finances." The next 30 minutes were excruciating. I watched my son's expression change from confusion to disbelief to anger as he went through the documents. "This can't be right," he kept saying. "There must be some explanation." I showed him the notebook with the practiced signatures. His face went pale. "When did you find this?" he whispered. 2 months ago, in my office, behind the filing cabinet." David shook his head. "Maybe she was helping you sign things when you weren't feeling well. After Dad died, you were pretty out of it for a while." He was grasping for explanations that didn't make his wife a criminal. I understood. I'd done the same at first. "David," I said gently, "the signatures were forged on documents I never saw. Money was moved to accounts I didn't know existed. Over $150,000 is missing. I pointed to the summary page Patricia had prepared. That's not helping. That's stealing. David pushed the folder away suddenly, his expression hardening. Did you talk to Melissa about this? Ask her to explain. I shook my head. I was afraid he cut me off. Afraid. Of Melissa, Mom. Do you hear yourself? She's been helping you manage everything while I'm working 60-hour weeks. She drives you to appointments. She checks on you when I can't. And this is how you repay her, by hiring a lawyer. He'd spotted Patricia watching us from across the room. David, please. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. There's documented evidence, I said, my voice breaking. The money is gone. Ask her where it went. He stood up abruptly. I'm not doing this. Whatever confusion there is about your money, we can sort it out as a family. Without lawyers. Without accusations. He threw some cash on the table for his untouched coffee. I need to go. I'll talk to Melissa about this. As he walked out, I sat frozen, the weight of what had just happened crushing me. Patricia came over, sliding into the booth across from me. That didn't go as hoped, she said quietly. I couldn't speak through my tears. Eleanor, she continued, this reaction is actually common. The initial denial, the anger directed at the messenger rather than the perpetrator. He needs time to process. I shook my head. He's going to tell her everything. Warn her. What do we do now? Patricia gathered the documents, her expression grim. Now we move to Plan B. We send the formal demand letter before she can cover her tracks, and we consider whether to involve the police. The restaurant suddenly felt too crowded, the air too thin. I need to go home, I whispered. Patricia nodded. I'll drive you. You shouldn't be alone right now. That evening, as Patricia had predicted, the calls began. First from Melissa, 5 in a row that I let go to voicemail. Her messages evolved from concern. David told me you're confused about some financial matters. Too defensive. I've only ever tried to help you, to threatening you're making serious accusations that could have legal consequences for you, Eleanor. Then David called, his voice strained. Mom, you need to talk to us. Melissa says there's an explanation for everything in those documents. She's really upset that you went behind her back. I finally answered on his third attempt. David, I said. Quietly, I didn't go behind anyone's back. I investigated why my money was disappearing. If Melissa has an explanation, she can put it in writing. My lawyer's address is on the letter she received tomorrow. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, David spoke, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. So that's it. You're really doing this? Going after Melissa legally? I closed my eyes, picturing my grandchildren, wondering when I would see them again. I'm trying to recover my life savings, I said. Money that your father and I worked our entire lives for. Money that was taken without my knowledge or permission. What would Dad say about this, David? What would he expect me to do? It was a low blow, invoking Frank, but I needed to break through somehow. David's voice broke slightly. Don't bring Dad into this. Then, quieter. I need to understand what's happening. Can you at least send me copies of what you have, so I can see for myself? A small opening. I'll email everything tonight, I promised. All I ask is that you look at it objectively. That's all. After we hung up, I forwarded the documents to him, adding a note. I love you, David. Whatever happens, that won't change. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound, half expecting Melissa to show up at my door demanding a confrontation. By morning, exhaustion had given way to a strange calm. What would happen would happen. I had done what I needed to protect myself. Patricia called around noon. The demand letter has been delivered via courier. It gives her 30 days to return the funds, with a full accounting of where the money went. After that, we proceed with legal action and file a police report. I sank into my kitchen chair. What now? I asked. Now we wait, Patricia said, but not passively. We need to prepare for different scenarios. We discussed security measures, changing my locks, installing cameras, documenting any contact from Melissa or David and Eleanor. Patricia added before hanging up, consider reaching out to friends, to your community. You need support right now. That last suggestion seemed impossible at first. The shame of being victimized by my own daughter-in-law felt too private, too humiliating to share. But isolation would only make this harder. So that afternoon, I called Margaret, my oldest friend who lived a few blocks away. We'd grown distant after Frank died. My withdrawal, not hers. Can I come over? I asked without preamble. I need a friend right now. Margaret didn't hesitate. I'll put on coffee, she said. 2 hours later, sitting in her sunroom surrounded by houseplants Frank had always admired, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. What do you need? She asked simply. Right now, today. The question caught me off guard. What did I need? I need not to be alone with this, I finally said. Margaret nodded. Then you won't be. True to her word, Margaret became my rock over the next few weeks. She accompanied me to meetings with Patricia. She stayed overnight when I was too anxious to sleep alone. She answered my phone when Melissa called, politely informing her that all communication should go through my attorney. And most importantly, she helped me start rebuilding a life beyond this crisis, taking me to community events, reconnecting me with old friends, even convincing me to actually try that pottery class I'd invented as an alibi. You can't put your life on hold waiting for this to resolve, she insisted. You need reasons to get up in the morning beyond checking your bank accounts. She was right, of course. And it was at the Rochester Community Center's pottery class that I met Richard. He was 70, a retired high school principal, widowed 2 years earlier. He had gentle hands and a terrible sense of humor, and he made the worst clay bowls I'd ever seen. They're more abstract art than functional pottery, he joked, holding up a lopsided creation. I laughed, really laughed, for what felt like the first time in years. We started having coffee after class, then lunch, then dinner. I told him about Frank, about my estrangement from David, even about the ongoing legal situation with Melissa, though not in detail at first. He told me about his wife Janet's long battle with cancer, about his 3 grown daughters who lived in different states, about his passion for woodworking and terrible pottery. Richard became another sanctuary in the storm that was my life. With him, I could forget about demand letters and bank statements and betrayal. We went to museums and concerts, took walks along the canal, cooked elaborate meals together. You know what Janet always said? He told me one evening as we sat on his porch watching the sunset. The best revenge is living well. She was talking about her high school reunion, but I think it applies to your situation too. I leaned against his shoulder. I'm not sure I want revenge, I admitted. I just want justice. And to be able to move forward. Richard took my hand. Those are good goals. Much healthier than revenge. He kissed me softly. Though a little revenge can be satisfying too. I laughed, feeling the weight on my shoulders lighten slightly. Meanwhile, the 30-day deadline in Patricia's letter came and went with no response from Melissa. David had stopped calling after our initial conversation. His silence, more painful than any angry words could have been. Through mutual friends, I heard that he and Melissa were telling people I was having memory issues, that I was confused about financial arrangements I had agreed to. The narrative was being constructed exactly as Patricia had warned. We proceeded with the next step, filing a formal complaint with the Police Financial Crimes Unit and initiating a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. Detective Rivera was assigned to my case, a serious woman with 20 years' experience in financial crimes. Elder fraud is one of the fastest-growing types of theft, she told me during our first meeting, and family members are among the most common perpetrators. Somehow that didn't make me feel better. The investigation moved methodically. Detective Rivera subpoenaed bank records, interviewed bank employees, and built a case that even I found shocking in its details. Melissa hadn't just taken money from my accounts. She had opened credit cards in my name, taken out a home equity line of credit on my house, and even tried to change the beneficiary on one of my insurance policies. The total amount stolen, or fraudulently obtained, had reached $217,842. When presented with this evidence, the district attorney decided to pursue criminal charges: grand larceny, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. Melissa was arrested on a Tuesday morning, photographed, fingerprinted, and released on bail by afternoon. The local paper ran a small story. Local realtor charged with stealing from mother-in-law. My private shame was now public knowledge. The fallout was swift and furious. David left a voicemail that still haunts me. Are you happy now? You've destroyed our family. Melissa could lose her real estate license. We could lose our house. The kids are asking why Grandma put Mommy in jail. I hope it was worth it. I played it for Patricia, who shook her head. He's blaming the victim, not the perpetrator. Classic displacement. Logical, perhaps, but it didn't ease the pain. Margaret and Richard formed a protective circle around me. Richard's daughters, upon hearing my story during a visit, expressed outrage on my behalf. Dad always said to watch out for people who try to separate elderly parents from their money. His oldest, Catherine, told me, though I don't think he meant your own daughter-in-law. I winced at elderly. I didn't feel elderly but appreciated the support. The criminal case would take months to go to trial. The civil case moved somewhat faster, with a court date set for 3 months out. Life settled into an uneasy pattern. Meetings with Patricia and Detective Rivera, pottery classes with Margaret, evenings with Richard, and a house that felt increasingly empty without visits from my son and grandchildren. I began receiving cards and calls from church members and old friends, many expressing support, some awkwardly avoiding mentioning the situation. My sister flew in from Arizona for a week, bringing her righteous anger and practical help in equal measure. "Let's update your will," she suggested over breakfast one morning. "Make sure that woman can never touch a penny of your money, even after you're gone." A morbid conversation, perhaps, but a necessary one. As the civil court date approached, something unexpected happened. Richard proposed. We were having dinner at his house. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and garlic bread at his kitchen table. "Eleanor," he said, reaching across to take my hand. "I know this might seem sudden or poorly timed given everything else happening in your life. But when you find happiness at our age, you don't wait. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness. Even after everything you've been through, I want to spend whatever years we have left together. Will you marry me?" I sat in shocked silence, a forkful of pasta halfway to my mouth. "Richard," I finally managed, "are you sure? My life is so complicated right now," he smiled. "All the more reason not to face it alone." I thought about Frank, about the life we'd had, about what he would want from me now. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how right it felt. "Yes, I'll marry you." We decided on a small ceremony at St. Matthew's, where I'd been a member for decades. Father Matthews, who had known Frank and me throughout our marriage, was delighted to officiate. "Love in the later chapters of life is a special blessing," he told us during our first planning meeting. We set the date for May 15th, giving us 3 months to prepare. It would be after the civil court case, but before the criminal trial. A window of calm in the storm, Richard called it. Planning the wedding became a welcome distraction from legal proceedings. Margaret appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator. Richard's daughters flew in to help shop for my dress, a pale blue tea-length gown that made me feel elegant rather than appropriately elderly. For a few weeks, I could focus on joy instead of betrayal. Then came the civil court date. I sat in the courtroom beside Patricia, trying not to look across the aisle where Melissa sat with her attorney. David was notably absent. The proceedings were less dramatic than TV had led me to expect, mostly technical testimony about bank records, signature verification from a forensic handwriting expert, and my own account of discovering the theft. To Melissa's defense was exactly what Patricia had predicted. She claimed I had authorized all the transfers, that she had been helping manage my finances at my request, that any signatures I didn't recognize were ones I had forgotten signing during my period of grief. Her attorney attempted to paint me as confused, possibly suffering from early dementia. Patricia systematically dismantled this narrative, presenting my clear bank records since taking control of my own finances again. Testimony from Mr. Torres about my detailed understanding of the fraud. Even records of my recent community college enrollment in a Spanish class. Hardly the action of someone with cognitive impairment, as Patricia put it. After 2 grueling days, the judge ruled in my favor on all counts. Melissa was ordered to repay the full $217,842, plus interest and legal fees. When the verdict was announced, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a deep sadness. Across the courtroom, Melissa showed no reaction beyond a tightening of her jaw. Her attorney immediately announced their intention to appeal. Outside the courthouse, Patricia fielded questions from a local reporter while I slipped away to Richard's waiting car. "It's a win," Patricia had assured me. "The appeal is standard procedure, but the evidence is overwhelming." A win that felt hollow without my son, without my grandchildren, without the family I had lost in pursuit of justice. That evening, alone with Richard in my living room, I broke down completely. What if David's right? I sobbed. What if I've destroyed our family over money? What kind of grandmother does that make me? Richard held me, letting me cry it out before responding. Eleanor, listen to me. You didn't destroy anything. Melissa did that when she chose to steal from you. The money isn't just money, it's your security, your independence, your future, our future, he added softly. You had every right to protect that. He was right, logically, but logic doesn't ease a broken heart. I miss my grandchildren, I whispered. Richard nodded. I know. And someday, when they're older, they'll understand what really happened. Until then, we keep the door open. We send birthday cards, Christmas gifts. We never stop reaching out. The we in his words was a comfort I hadn't known I needed. In the weeks following the civil verdict, an unexpected development occurred. David called. His voice was stiff, formal, but he was calling the kids Miss. You, he said after an awkward greeting. Would it be okay if I brought them to visit? Just them, not Melissa. I gripped the phone tightly. Of course, I managed. Anytime. You know that. There was a long pause. Mom, I don't know what to believe anymore. The evidence seems clear, but Melissa swears there's an explanation. She's my wife, the mother of my children. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. I understand, David. I'm not asking you to choose. I just want to see you and the kids. We arranged for a visit that weekend. After hanging up, I called Richard, then Margaret, then Patricia with the news. A small bridge being rebuilt. A tentative step toward healing. The visit was both wonderful and heartbreaking. Emma and Jacob burst through my door with the energy only children possess, full of stories and hugs, as if no time had passed. David remained reserved, watching our interactions with guarded eyes. Grandma, are you really getting married again? Emma asked over the cookies and milk I'd prepared. Yes, sweetie, to a very nice man named Richard. You'll meet him soon. I glanced at David, who gave a small nod. Permission, can we come to the wedding? Jacob wanted to know. Before I could answer, David interjected. We'll have to see, buddy. It depends on a lot of things. The unspoken complexity hung in the air, but I chose to focus on the positive. I would love for you to be there, I told the children. All of you, I added, looking directly at David. He held my gaze for a moment before looking away. Progress, however small, as May approached, wedding preparations accelerated. We kept it simple, about 50 guests, a reception at Richard's house afterward. David had agreed to attend with the children, though Melissa would not be coming a relief, given the circumstances. The criminal case against her was proceeding, with a trial date set for August. Meanwhile, we'd heard through Patricia that Melissa was struggling to secure the funds to pay the civil judgment. A real estate business had suffered after the local news coverage, and their household finances were strained. I took no pleasure in this knowledge, especially knowing how it affected my grandchildren. I even considered dropping the criminal charges, but Detective Rivera advised against it. This isn't just about your case, she explained. If she's done this to you, she may have done it to others, or will, in the future. The criminal justice system needs to address this behavior. The week before the wedding, I received a request from Melissa's attorney to meet and discuss a potential resolution to both the civil judgment and pending criminal charges. Patricia accompanied me to the meeting at her office. Melissa and her attorney sat across from us, the conference room air heavy with tension. Mrs. Gardner, the attorney began, my client would like to offer a settlement. She proposes to return $150,000 of the judgment amount immediately, with the remaining balance paid in monthly installments over 5 years. In exchange, she asks that you support a plea agreement in the criminal case that would avoid jail time and allow her to keep her real estate license. I looked at Melissa, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Her polished facade had slipped dark circles under her eyes, hair lacking its usual perfect styling, fingers nervously twisting her wedding ring. Where would the $150,000 come from? I asked, addressing her directly. Her attorney started to answer, but Melissa interrupted. We're selling the house in Fairport, the one we bought last year, the house likely purchased with my money, and the remaining $67,842 plus interest. Melissa swallowed visibly. Monthly payments. I can manage $1,500 a month. The attorney slid a document across the table. We've prepared a payment agreement. If you'll sign this and speak to the DA about a plea arrangement, we can transfer the initial payment immediately. Patricia reviewed the document carefully, whispering questions and concerns to me. The terms were solid, the consequences for missed payments severe, but something felt unresolved. I have conditions, I said finally, beyond what's in this agreement. Melissa's attorney looked wary. What conditions? I leaned forward. First, I want a letter. A full accounting of where my money went, what it was used for, everything. Second, I want an apology, not to me, necessarily, but to David and the children. They deserve to understand what happened. And third, I want your assurance that you'll seek counseling. Not because I care about your well-being, frankly, but because my grandchildren deserve a mother who doesn't see theft as a solution to financial problems. Melissa's face flushed with anger, then embarrassment. Her attorney whispered something to her, and she nodded stiffly. I can agree to those terms, she said, her voice barely audible. We left with the agreement unsigned, giving Patricia time to incorporate my conditions into the formal document, but a resolution was in sight. The day before my wedding, David came to see me alone. We sat in the backyard where he had played as a child, the spring flowers Frank had planted years ago blooming around us. Melissa told me about the settlement, he said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. She also told me other things, about why she took the money, about how it started small and just escalated. I waited, letting him find his words. She said it began with helping you pay bills after Dad died, seeing how much money you had while we were struggling with the kids' school tuition and medical bills. She felt it was unfair, somehow. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. That's not an excuse, I know that, but she's getting help now, therapy, and she's terrified of losing the kids if she goes to jail. I reached over, taking his hand. I never wanted that, David, you have to believe me. I just wanted my security back. The money your father and I saved for our old age. David squeezed my hand. I know, Mom, I should have seen what was happening. I should have asked more questions when we suddenly could afford the house in Fairport. He looked up, his eyes glistening. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you at first. I felt my own tears start. You were caught in an impossible position, I told him. Torn between your wife and your mother. I understand that, truly. We sat in silence for a while, hands still joined. Will you walk me down the aisle tomorrow? I asked finally, since your father can't be there. David nodded, unable to speak. Another bridge rebuilt, stronger this time. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect May morning. Margaret helped me dress in my blue gown, fussing with my hair and makeup. Frank would be happy for you, she said, adjusting my pearl necklace, a gift from my first husband. That felt right to wear today. He'd want you to have love in your life again. I nodded, believing it was true. At the church, I found David waiting in the small anteroom, handsome in his dark suit. Emma was serving as my flower girl, Jacob as ring bearer. Ready, Mom? David offered his arm. As we prepared to enter the sanctuary, I felt a strange mix of emotions, joy for the new beginning with Richard, gratitude for this moment with my son, sadness that it had taken such trauma to arrive here, and yes, even a sense of triumph that I had fought for myself and won. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Father Matthews spoke about second chances and the wisdom that comes with age. Richard's vows made me laugh and cry simultaneously. My own voice was steady as I promised to share my life with this kind, funny man who had appeared when I needed him most. As we exchanged rings, I caught sight of my grandchildren beaming from the front pew, David beside them with a complex expression of happiness and melancholy. We were pronounced husband and wife, sharing a tender kiss as our friends and family applauded. In that moment, everything felt possible. Healing, forgiveness, a future bright with new possibilities while honoring the past. We turned to face our guests, hands joined, when the side door of the sanctuary burst open. Melissa stood there, breathing hard as if she'd been running. The church fell silent. She was clutching a folder of documents, her face flushed with emotion. Stop, she called out, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. This wedding can't proceed. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. David half rose from his seat, shock evident on his face. Richard squeezed my hand reassuringly as Father Matthews stepped forward. "Mrs. Henderson," he said calmly, "this is most irregular. The ceremony is concluded." Melissa strode up the aisle, waving the folder. "She's not competent to marry," she announced, pointing at me. "I have documentation proving Eleanor has been experiencing cognitive decline. This marriage isn't valid." The accusation hung in the air, exactly the narrative she had been constructing for months. Father Matthews held out his hand for the documents, his expression professionally neutral. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," he suggested. "No," I said firmly, finding my voice. "Whatever those papers are, everyone here should know the truth." I turned to our guests. "As many of you know, my daughter has been legally ordered to repay over $200,000 she stole from me after my first husband died." More murmurs, heads turning toward David, who looked stricken. "This claim about my mental competence is just another attempt to avoid responsibility." Richard stood beside me, solid as a mountain. Melissa thrust the papers at Father Matthews. "These prove everything. Bank statements showing her irrational spending, notes from her doctor about memory issues." The priest adjusted his glasses and began reviewing the documents. The sanctuary was eerily quiet, 200 guests frozen in disbelief at the drama unfolding. Father Matthews skimmed the papers, his expression changing subtly as he read. Then he looked up, not at me, but at Melissa. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the silent church, "these are not competency evaluations. These appear to be bank statements from an account in your name, with transfers totaling exactly $217,842 from Eleanor's accounts over the past 14 months." The color drained from Melissa's face as whispers erupted throughout the sanctuary. David stood completely now, moving toward his wife with confusion written across his features. Father Matthews continued, his voice grave. "There is also what appears to be a drafted email to Mrs. Gardner's doctor, requesting falsified records of memory problems. I'm afraid these documents only provide further evidence of the financial exploitation the court has already ruled on. I had known those documents would be revealed today. I'd asked my lawyer to give them to Father Matthews before the ceremony, evidence we'd gathered but hadn't needed to use in the civil trial. What I hadn't expected was for Melissa to create the perfect moment for their revelation by trying to stop my wedding." I watched as David reached his wife, took her arm, and spoke quietly but intensely in her ear. She seemed to crumple slightly, looking around at the faces of friends, family, and many of her real estate clients, witnessing her humiliation. Without another word, she allowed David to lead her back down the aisle and out of the church. Detective Rivera, who had been a guest at the wedding, discreetly followed. Later, I would learn that this incident violated the terms of Melissa's bail, adding complications to her legal situation. Father Matthews cleared his throat, bringing focus back to the altar. "I believe we were concluding a joyful celebration," he said warmly. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, may I present you to your community." Richard and I turned once more to face our guests, many of whom looked shell-shocked, but then Margaret started applauding, followed by Richard's daughters, and soon the entire congregation joined in, perhaps as much from relief at the dramatic resolution as celebration of our marriage. We processed down the aisle to continuing applause, pausing only briefly where David had been sitting. Emma and Jacob still sat there, confusion evident on their young faces. "We'll explain later," I promised them softly. "Grandma and Grandpa Richard will be at the reception waiting for you." Their small nods of trust meant everything. The reception continued without David and Melissa, though Emma and Jacob were brought by a family friend about an hour later. "Dad said to tell you he's sorry about Mom ruining things," Emma whispered as she hugged me. "He said to have fun and he'll talk to you tomorrow." I blinked back tears, smiling for my granddaughter's benefit. "Nothing's ruined, sweetheart. This day is perfect because you and Jacob are here." And somehow, despite everything, it was true. Richard and I danced our first dance to Frank Sinatra's The Second Time Around, fitting for two people finding love after loss. Friends offered heartfelt toasts. The cake was cut and shared, and gradually the drama of the ceremony faded into background as celebration took precedence. That night, in Richard's house, our house now, we sat on the porch swing talking about the day. Not exactly the quiet, dignified ceremony we planned. Richard chuckled, his arm around my shoulders. But memorable, certainly. I leaned against him, exhausted but content. "Do you regret marrying into all this drama?" I asked. He kissed the top of my head. "Not for a second. Though I am looking forward to the honeymoon cruise where no one can burst in with incriminating documents." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. 2 weeks of nothing but ocean, good food, and my new husband. It sounds perfect. We sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "With Melissa, with David, with everything." Richard considered the question. "Justice has been served, at least financially. The criminal case will proceed, but your agreement with the DA will likely mean probation rather than jail time. David and the children will adjust. Families are resilient, especially when there's love as a foundation." He squeezed my hand. "And you and I will build our life together, supporting them through the healing process." The wisdom in his words washed over me. There would be more difficult days ahead, more complex emotions to navigate. But I had fought for my dignity, for my security, for the respect I deserved. I had found unexpected love and strength in the process. "Eleanor Harrington," I said softly, testing my new name. "I like the sound of that." Richard smiled. "So do I, Mrs. Harrington. So do I." In the 3 months since our wedding, much has changed. Melissa accepted a plea deal that included 5 years of probation, mandatory financial counseling, and 200 hours of community service. She and David are in marriage counseling, trying to rebuild their relationship on a more honest foundation. They sold the house in Fairport and moved to a smaller home they can actually afford. Emma and Jacob visit us every weekend, filling our home with the noise and energy only grandchildren can bring. Richard and I have settled into a comfortable routine, taking classes together at the community center, planning trips to visit his daughters, and hosting Sunday dinners for friends and family, including, occasionally and awkwardly, David and Melissa. The road to forgiveness is long and not always straight. There are days when I look at Melissa and still feel the sting of betrayal. There are moments when David's initial disbelief still hurts. But there are also afternoons watching Richard teach Jacob woodworking in the garage, evenings helping Emma with her science projects, mornings waking up beside a man who loves me completely. Life has a way of moving forward, even after the most painful chapters. The money has been mostly repaid, the initial $150,000, plus regular monthly payments as agreed. My financial security has been restored, my independence preserved. More importantly, my family, though changed, remains intact, wounded but healing. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. For too long, I worried about creating waves, about being a burden, about keeping peace at any cost. That mindset made me vulnerable to someone who saw my politeness as weakness. Now I know better. Now I speak up. Now I check my bank statements regularly. Now I trust, but verify. These aren't just lessons from me. They're lessons I share with friends my age, many of whom face similar vulnerabilities. Watch your accounts, I tell them. Ask questions. Don't sign anything without reading it. And if something feels wrong, listen to that feeling. What would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you so completely? Would you fight back, as I did, despite the family complications? Would you have the courage to start again at 62? To open your heart to new love while healing from deep wounds? I hope you never face such choices. But if you do, remember my story. Remember that you deserve respect, protection, security. Remember that it's never too late to stand in your power. If you know someone who might be facing elder financial abuse, share this with them. Tell them they're not alone. Tell them justice is possible, even when it's painful. And if you're listening to this from a place of uncertainty or fear, know that there's strength inside you waiting to be found. I discovered mine at 62. You can find yours too. No matter your age, remember the scent of lilacs that filled the church that May morning, the same scent that now fills our garden where Richard and I sit each evening, planning our future together. Life's sweetest moments often come after its bitterest trials.